Welcome to Every Child Belongs. I'm Kim Botto, an adoptive mom, grandma, an advocate for kids and teens with disabilities, as well as a longtime leader of kids and student ministries. In this show, we explore how we can create spaces where every child feels heard and valued, whether neurodivergent, differently abled, or they've experienced trauma. Every child belongs. We'll hear from educators, parents, professionals, and more, finding practical ideas that help build a compassionate and supportive world for every child. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Every Child Belongs. I am so happy to have my buddy, my pal, Ryan North, with us today. Funny story about Ryan. The first time we met each other, do you remember? We had talked to each other on the phone. You had helped me with certain stuff.
Yeah, for years.
Yes, for years. And we ran into each other at CAFO, Christian Alliance for Orphans Conference. We were very far apart in a room of hundreds of people. You screamed my name. I screamed yours. We went running to each other. We embraced. And then I go, oh, nice to meet you. So
I do remember. It was in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, it was. So it was great. But anyway, Ryan, besides being my friend, he's also the co-founder with his beautiful wife, Kayla, of One Big Happy Home. And you just told me you just have done your 200th episode of the podcast Empowered Parent.
We're coming up on 200. I think it's like 180 or so.
No, that's close enough. You can.
We rounded up.
You can round up.
Yeah,
that's 200. And through One Big Happy Home, you train churches, you train organizations, you do parent coaching, you go to a bunch of conferences.
Yep.
I'm so appreciative of the work you do, and you have actually helped me. You're also hysterically funny. I always laugh when I'm with you. And Ryan has a cough today that is triggered by laughter, so you'll probably hear him cough today. And you are what people consider an expert, and I do too, on trauma-informed care, kids from hard places.
Yeah.
And you have a whole bunch of kids in your home.
Yes.
Oh, wait, I need to mention too. Look, I brought my devotion. Ryan wrote a devotional for adoptive parents wherever you go. I wanted you to see it. See how it has coffee stains on it?
Oh, yes, I see them.
So I have used this book. So check out
as a
that
coaster.
book.
You've clearly used it as a coaster.
I've read it. So Ryan, what did I leave out? What else would you like people to know? Tell us more about the work you do and your family.
Yeah, so, I'll try to give you the 30-second version of that, Kim, in that my wife and I, we agree on this principle that unless we're positively affecting, informing every single environment a child operates in, we're not going to make the progress. The child's not going to make the progress that they need, right? Because as we all know, one of the great principles of trauma-informed care, whatever that phrase means, is that we need consistency and predictability. And so if you're getting parented at home, or if you have a therapist who understands trauma, that's great, but it's still just 55 minutes every Wednesday. And so mom and dad need to understand trauma, and they need to understand how to help you. Well, that's great too, but then you realize that's not enough either, because kids spend more waking hours at school than they do anywhere else. And so, and then for families of faith, they also spend time in the church, and so that's a real big one for us, because I'm old school enough to still believe 100% that Jesus is the answer, and He created His church to help people connect with those answers. Right. And so if churches are in environments where children are understood and loved, then we're really missing an enormous opportunity. And so we decided that if we were going to do this, we were going to have content. So we have courses, workshops, coaching for parents. We have training for schools. We, which actually is a pretty difficult environment to get a foothold in.
How so?
Because the amount of time that you need in order to provide a decent education, most school districts are not willing to give you. And willing is the wrong word. Can I TBRI that? Can I try that again?
Yes, you can try that again.
I don't think they're able to give it to you, because when they have in-service days with the teachers, there's just so many things. And my understanding from speaking to administrators is that every year there's just more and more requirements. HR has to have time with them. Legal has to have time with them. They have to do all of the new state testing protocols and policies. And there's just a lot of things they need to do. And so they'll say, well, what can you do in an hour? And I said, I can introduce myself, I guess. But I'm not sure that's going to help anybody. But on occasion, school districts, and it's typically when they reach sort of the pain threshold for this kind of thing, they'll reach out and they'll give us a whole day. And we feel like that's at minimum. So that's kind of why that's a hard environment, because just the way the school calendar works out, they don't have the amount of time that I think would be the bare minimum amount of time for us to do that. And then we started a couple of years ago writing curriculum for child placing agencies. So there's a few agencies around the country that use our content for their pre-service training for foster families, and there's several that use our content as part of their ongoing education for families. And so we feel like we can positively impact all of those environments. This year we started something new. We started a leadership development program for nonprofit, whether that be executive leadership or actually the people in the middle. Care Portal will have some folks in there, and they put a couple of individuals who are in their mid-20s in there, with the idea that they felt, well, if somebody invested in us in our mid-20s, we think we'd be better at what we're doing now. So we're trying to just positively impact every possible realm in which children at the end of the equation are impacted, and we want that to be impacted positively.
So you're obviously very passionate about this, and it's specifically around kids who have experienced trauma. So why are you so passionate about it?
Um, I would say that part of that would have been kids who experienced trauma, but we got a couple of bio kiddos, and our oldest biological child. Because oftentimes when we say kids who experience trauma, what we mean is kids who are in the foster care system or were adopted, right? But there are a lot of bio kiddos who don't end up in the system, who have a ton of adversity in their lives, and so with our oldest bio daughter, she had a real difficult entry into the world, and as a result of that, we see some behaviors that would certainly be consistent with somebody who had experienced some complex developmental trauma. The other thing that's passionate that makes me passionate about that is I think that we all can learn and heal. And so anytime we're with an audience, there's this component of if you want to help somebody, you need to understand them. And if you want to understand somebody, you need to understand yourself. And so I've had a lot of great people invest in me over the years. Some names that are household names who we started this stuff when they were first, getting some recognition nationally, and have mentored me and my wife and poured into us and called us out and all the things you need a good mentor to do. And at the end of it, Kim, what I came to realize is somebody asked me a long, long time ago, what do you think your purpose is? And so I've always thought about purpose and legacy. And I think that I have complete clarity why God put me on the earth. It's one of the things that I learned from Karen Purvis. I've never known anybody before or since that appeared to have such clarity about why God put her on the earth. And just the way she spoke about stuff, it was overwhelming the first time I sat in a room with her and she talked about some of it. But I feel like the reason that God put me on the earth was to help people fulfill their potential. But adversity and trauma really changes the trajectory of an individual's life. And so if we don't help people heal and recover, they're never going to be everything that God intended for them to be. God talks about the good works that he prepared in advance for you to do. Well, some of that might not happen because of the way you were treated as a child, because you won't have the confidence, you won't have the abilities, you won't feel relationally connected enough. And so I think that, I don't mean to sound like theatrical, but I really feel like we're on mission for God to do these things. And it's why we flew on the weekend, last week, to an event in Kansas City. And somebody said to me, are you nervous to fly? Because I don't know if you know this, but I used to be terrified of flying. They said, are you nervous to fly because of everything that's been going on in aviation in the United States? And I said, no. And they said, why? And I said, because I don't think I'm done with what God wants me to do. I have confidence in that.
Mm-hmm.
And so since I have complete clarity about who my actual boss is, I think that's what drives
That's
us.
good. Yes. You, yeah, I want to affirm you. You, God is doing incredible work through you and Kayla and the way that you're helping people respond to kids. And I want to go back to where you talked about it's not just adoptive and foster kids. I agree. I think a lot of people when they look at these trauma informed principles, because people will say to me, well, yeah, but he's lived with his biological parents his whole life, so why should I use these principles on them? And these are just I like to look at them as, with trauma informed care or TBRI principles. They're really a great way to respond to any kid with big behaviors or concerning behaviors. It's not just for adoptive and foster care. But we haven't talked about your family. You
Yeah.
talked about you have a couple of bio kids. Tell us more about your family.
Okay. So we fostered for 10 years in Texas, had 30 kids in our home over those 10 years. We have 6 children. 4 of those 6 were adopted from the child welfare system here in Texas, and 2 bios. They are currently aged 20 through 12. Our oldest is 22. He was the second to arrive home. He was almost 4 when he arrived. Our second is 20, and she arrived at 4 months. Our third is 17. He was 4 when he came home. Our fourth is 16. She's bio. And then our fifth is 13. And she's the biological sister of our 17-year-old son. She came home a few months after him. She was hospitalized when he was placed with us. And then the caboose is 12.
Mm-hmm.
And you have probably met Libby because she comes with us to
I
CAFO.
have. She's adorable.
She is, I don't know, in my mind, everything the baby of the family should be. And she's just, so that's all of them. And when we've talked to a lot of parents over the last 15 years, and one of the sort of meta narratives we find is that they'll say some version of my family doesn't support us, my friends don't support us, my mom and dad didn't think we should have done this. And Kayla and I experienced all of that. For us to look at the situation in our extended family now and go, it's good, but to realize that it hasn't been like that forever. I mean, I remember my dad, when we took our last 2 foster placements, he said to me, when are you guys going to stop this? And I said, why? And he said, because you're just messing up your other kids. And so, I mean, that was a not good conversation that followed between us, but I think the reason they've all softened is because they've come to understand and witness with their own eyes that my children are kinder, more empathetic, and certainly more compassionate than children their ages usually are, because they've had to live with kids that they fully understood were in our home because they had come from a dangerous situation. And so I think they have great perspective on life. I think, our 13-year-old daughter is developmentally about 20 months old. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but you probably have because of the things that you do. If you don't know how to interact with a special needs child, just watch their siblings.
Right.
And so if ever we go anywhere and a child is in a wheelchair or, walks with a non-typical gait or anything like that, my children will just go right over to them and make sure that they feel included in everything that's going on. And I don't think a lot of kids their age are like that. The worst thing that a couple of my daughters can imagine is somebody feeling like they're not included.
Yes. Well, that's because that's how you and Kayla live your life.
Yeah, obviously we've mentored that, but I think that the foster parenting thing really helped them with that too, because they've seen real struggles and they've watched, well, I don't react like that, and we're the same age. And I think part of it is that Kayla and I are endlessly curious people, and so that's been really good because the kids have become endlessly curious, and they say, well, why did he react like that? and then we get to have an opportunity. You know, you asked about my family, and this wasn't part of the question, but I'd like to say that one of the things that I enjoy about our household is that everything's on the table for discussion. And so when there are big issues in the culture, my children say, can we talk about that? Yeah, we sit around the table for hours and talk about it. And so I won't get into any of specifics there, but if it was a hot button issue culturally in the last 5 years, the North group has sat around. Well, I'm going to start a company and call it the North Group. I like the way that sounded. The North Group has sat around the table or sat around the living room and really dug into it in age-appropriate ways. And one of the things that we love about our family is that we want to think about it and think about it in ways that our actions, honor people and honor God. And so, what does it mean to love your neighbor the way you love yourself is certainly something that's constantly in the conversation at our home.
Right. Well, you talked about siblings, and yes, siblings, because they have such close proximity, whether it be a brother and sister who had a hard, early life or has disabilities or are neurodivergent, they do tend to be more empathetic. And how can we help other kids who don't have that proximity? How can we help them to have the empathy and compassion and the desire to include, like you mentioned that your kids have?
Well, this is the part where you really wanted Kayla North as your guest because I think my wife's a master at this. Because one of the things that she's really good at is she's not good at direct confrontation, which is probably serves her well in dealing with children who are gonna some version of disassociate or want to fight about every time you talk to them, right? And so I'll give you an example of a way she does that, and then I'll answer your question more specifically. If because children, their base emotions are I'm sad, I'm angry, or I'm happy. Well, the spectrum of human emotions is much broader than that, and typically it's nuanced, right? What's a different? There's angry, there's frustrated, there's disappointed, there's all of these negative emotions, but they do mean different things. And so the children would come in and say, "I'm so mad at Josh because he," and Kayla would say, "Well, baby, tell me about it." And then she'd explain, and she goes, "Yeah, I'd be frustrated if that happened to me too." And so she never corrected them. She just used the more appropriate emotional word to connect them to their feelings. And over time, she's been really good at that, and I've learned that from her. And so she reflects back to you what you're likely experiencing. And as such, my 12-year-old probably could name 24 emotions without even thinking about it. Well, the same when you're trying to understand someone's experience, she'll say, "Did you notice how so-and-so reacted? Did you know how person A reacted when person B said that thing?" And so she'll actually use these teachable moments to help you connect that your actions and your words have consequences for other people. And so one of the easy ways to do that is to point out how somebody else's words and actions impacted a third party, because that's non-threatening, because it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll do that, or we'll say, "Hey, do you remember how you felt when you were invited?" Well, that's kind of how she felt when you didn't include her. And then we'll take the next step and we'll try to connect their experience to somebody else's actions. And once we feel like that's good, then we might say, "Hey, can you notice how Addie reacted when you did that?" But I think to just go to step 3, forces is not the right word, but it certainly invites them to be defensive.
Oh, that's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, and when you're defensive, you can't hear.
You can't hear, right? And so it's kind of, and so you have to have the patience for it. People, people sometimes ask me weird questions, and I imagine you get weird questions too, Kim. Like, what do you think you're good at? Why do you think you're equipped to stand and talk to people about these things? I don't know if you get questions like that. I get them semi-frequently. And I will tell you that I think that my actual greatest skill that I think I have is that I'm able to wake up every morning and go, yesterday was not good, but the Lord let me see the sunrise today, so we're going to keep trying. And I think that sounds really great, like a Sunday school answer. I think part of the truth is that my wife and I are just innately stubborn people, and every single day is an opportunity to push back on any form of darkness in the world. And so what that means is that if trying choices, compromises, and redos didn't work the first 1,000 times, well, then I guess we're trying it 1,001 times. This morning I had a coaching call with a dad, and he wants answers, because everybody just likes, I need you to solve this problem now.
Right. Give me 3 steps.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, I mean, we can talk about some practical things you can do, but I do need to tell you, the time equals X, and I don't know what X is. Because you could do these things every single day for a month and see positive change, or you could see these things every single day, do these things every single day for 10 years and see positive change. I can't predict that for you. But what I do know is if you will stay faithful to the task, 2 things are going to happen. The child will change over time, and that's what you want. But you're going to change over time too.
Right.
And that's what you need.
Right.
Because I don't know if you've heard of this book, Dan Allender, how children raise their parents.
I haven't read it. I've heard of it.
Fascinating concept, right?
Okay, I'm writing it down.
And so one of the meta ideas in the book by Dr. Allender is that one of the ways that God brings you into closer relationship with Him and works on your personal sanctification is He'll send children to your house. And I think that's never more true than foster parents or families who've adopted.
Right.
Because I don't know enough to be able to make a really informed decision about how to engage the child. So I have to sort of engage the child with generally accepted good principles, but I also have to be endlessly curious about the child and the child's behavior. And I have to be willing to be that guy tomorrow. And I have to be willing to be that guy on Wednesday. And people will say to us, well, we tried everything. Okay, tell me. We've been doing this long enough that I don't go, oh, okay. I go, tell me what that is. Well, we did like choices and compromises for like a month, and it didn't help. I'm like, and I'll tell you this, Kim. What the Lord has really helped me understand is I don't lose patience with you, son. And because I completely accept that the Lord does not lose His patience with me, I cannot lose my patience over time with anybody. I have to, if I get frustrated or angry, I have to take a few deep breaths, and I have to consider, why does that bother me? And then I have to move forward, because the Lord is boundlessly gracious to me. And if I'm not boundlessly gracious to everybody, then I'm just the guy who was forgiven $1 million and threw somebody in jail because he owed him 10.
Now, you haven't always had that high level of patience, though. If you're loving today's conversation and want to dive even deeper into creating spaces where every child belongs, check out my book, Boundless Hope. It's packed with practical tools, real stories, and powerful insights to help you make a difference. Get yours today. Just head to kimbotto.com or Amazon to order now. So how do we build that skill, that patience muscle?
Kim, you talked about CAFO in Oklahoma City. I actually spoke about you to somebody in Kansas City over the weekend. We were having dinner after the event, and I said, Kim Botto said the nicest thing to me that anybody outside of my wife has ever said to me. We're in Nashville in September last year, and there was a group of us around the table, and everybody left. It was just me and you, and we were getting ready to leave, and you did Purvis hands and eyes. You took my hands, and you said, I want to tell you something. I said, what's up? Usually when people say I want to tell you something, I'm like, what did I do?
Right. You prepare yourself.
You're the most self-aware person I know.
Oh.
I will say that meant more to me than most things that I've ever received or heard in my life. because, because
Really?
I think that if you don't understand yourself, you can't help anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the ways that the Lord has been kind to me is He sent Kayla North to be my bride. That's another way you get sanctified, right, through your spouse.
She's a good one.
Well, because she's kind, but she's also from Texas, so you mostly kind of don't want to mess with her.
She speaks the truth.
She will. She does not like having difficult conversations, but she will tell you what's up
Mm-hmm.
in a very
Mm-hmm.
gentle way.
Right.
And so that's been good for me. Also, I'm endlessly curious about, I've always been, I don't remember a time in my life when I wasn't curious about why people did things. And I've always been curious about myself. I tell people all the time, you only ever learn two things from your parents: how to do it and how not to do it. Because you decide to embrace or reject the way you were raised. And so, I've watched think about my childhood and my mom and dad, and there's just some things that their late 70s, early 80s generally accepted parenting doesn't work in our universe. And as such, because I understand I don't want this to come out wrong, and so I know you'll know what I mean by this, and I hope your audience does too.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not just that I love my wife dearly; it's that I understand her value, and her purpose in my life. We got to do do a session on staying connected in marriage at the conference we were at. And one of the things over the years we've come to understand is that her happiness is not my goal, and my happiness is not her goal.
Mm-hmm.
Her walking in the fullness of her potential is my goal, and me walking in the fullness of mine is her goal. And so to support that and encourage that, because it changes difficult conversations. Because if she says something to me, I then filter it through. This is for my good, because she has a track record of being interested in my good, and not I get defensive because I can't believe she brought this up. And so we've learned that with each other. So I think the way you kind of get there is you give somebody the permission who's really proximate to you. And if you're married, that's an obvious one. But if you're single, you have to find somebody who's really proximate in relationship to you and tell them they have permission to speak the truth to you, even if they think you won't like it or not. Because we all have blind spots. You can't see them all. And so I think the road to self-awareness involves people who are willing to speak the truth to you.
Yes. And I appreciate you saying that you love Kayla and you recognize her value and worth. Because I think a lot of times, would you say we don't take that step? And I'm also thinking about with our kids, we love them, but have we communicated to them their value and worth?
That's a great question. And I think that a lot of times we don't. And I know that as we've gotten into better relationship with the children and worked on that we have we do that now. So I'll tell my kids, I'm glad I get to be your dad. You need to know that I consider it a privilege that I get to raise you. That's it. There's no but, there's no because. You have value because you opened your eyes this morning, and your behavior and your history does not change your value.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
I was speaking to somebody yesterday, and she was talking about some conflict that she had with her spouse years ago. And she said, I was so mad at him, and I was about to just read him the riot act. She said, but I just think the Lord allowed me to see my husband the way he sees my husband. And she said, I didn't yell at him because he just looked like a little boy who was afraid and ashamed, not like some big man who had bowed up and was going to defend his actions. And and I think the other component is being really involved in a good church that takes preaching the truth of the Bible very, very seriously. Our pastor says, you might not like what I have to say, but you're arguing with the Bible because this is not my opinion. And I think that is really, really good. And one of the things he likes to say is he'll point out, please remember that anybody that you're mad at, you have offended God as much, if not more, in your life. So don't be so quick to burn bridges relationally, because somebody made you mad. Please remember, you made God a lot more mad over the course of your crazy life. So everybody just catch their breath and quit acting like none of us do anything wrong. And so we sort of just apply that to parenting. I have this book that I take to church, and it started at the front, moving front to back, with notes about the sermon, and then at the back, moving like manga style. For example, in Japan, they start the books on what we would consider the last page of the book, and they moved from right to left. And so from a Western perspective, they're reading the book backwards. But certainly from an Eastern perspective, we're reading the book backwards. So yeah, they start at the right-hand cover and work their way to the left-hand cover, where we were start at the left-hand cover and work their way to the right. I write all of the ways that I think that I can apply what I'm learning.
That's being self-aware, Ryan. And I'm looking at so much of what you're talking about right now. You're talking about looking at ourselves first. When we're talking about a kid's behavior, when we're talking about relationships, it's looking at ourselves first. And I think you've given us some tips to do that.
So, Kim, if I could just add one thing to that.
Yeah.
My mind is wired to find one thing over here, and 3 days later, one over there, and a month later, one over there, and then realize that I have three things, and think of, I guess what I mean is I think in life in cumulative terms rather than isolated incident terms. So the trauma-informed progression, where kids feel safe, they can build relationship and behaviors change, right? So I have, based on two quotes, one from Jordan Peterson, one from Carl Jung. Peterson said, if you want to help somebody, you must first understand them. Jung said, if you want to understand the darkness that lives inside of somebody else, you must first understand the darkness that lives inside of you. And so my progression is, if you want to help people, you need to understand people. And in order to understand people, you have to understand yourself.
And that's hard, to put a mirror up to ourselves.
That's hard. But Kayla and I, because of some life events, made a real commitment to reducing the size of our buttons. And that meant sitting across from people who just have been really honest with us. I remember I went to see this therapist years ago, and in the first session, and I don't know if you're allowed to be in love with your therapist, but I don't love her. I'm in love with her. I'm sitting there and I'm just unloading about how other people are mistreating me and why I'm so mad at the world. And she's sitting like crisscross on her chair across from me, and she goes, "Can I stop you for a second?" I said, "Yeah, sure." She goes, "I can already tell what we need to work on." I said, "Oh, that's great." She said, "You're the problem." Like, if you don't have people like that in your life,
right,
you need to stop what you're doing now. And it doesn't need to be a therapist. You need friends who will tell you the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I find now, as I mature and as I get older, people who tell me, who just want to say nice things to me, that's not valuable to me. Right? You create things, and then people are like, "Well, here's my idea." And people go, "That's a good idea." And I'm like, "No, I already thought it was a good idea. That's why I told you. I need you to tell me all the ways that it's not a good idea."
Right.
And I think that takes actually some self-awareness and humility to get to that point, because I wasn't always there. I used to hate it when Kayla disagreed with my ideas. Now I hate it when she agrees with them.
You keep talking about community and the importance of having people around you. And as I think of so many adoptive and foster families that I talk to, they don't have that community for a whole bunch of reasons. Some of it because of their kids' behavior, they isolate. So what would you tell them as far as how do they build community so they have people? Like, if they're not self-aware, they have people that, well, even a self-aware person like yourself, you need people to call things out. So how do they build that community?
Well, I have several ideas. One is don't take conferences lightly. Like, conferences are a lot of things, but good and bad. But one of the things they're really good at is they allow you to meet people who are just like you.
Right.
And so what's become a trend over the last few years in conferences, now that every one of them has an app, is they'll do meetups. And so you can post a meetup and you can have lunch together, and it can be based on a myriad of things, right? So do those. Also, go to support groups. Also, find digital things. Like during COVID, we decided, like, I hate being in the house. I'm an insanely restless person, and so when I had a foot injury, and I thought, well, maybe this is my version of he's making me lie down because I don't do it naturally. And so we decided, well, everybody's got to be going nuts, being stuck in the house just like we are. So we started doing meetups on Zoom. People all across the country, people from Hawaii and a bunch of states across the country, just started doing just sitting, hanging out once a week for an hour on Zoom. Just because, are you bored at home? You want to talk to other adults? Come on. Well, as a result of that, there's a couple we met that Kayla and I do a family camp for adoptive foster families in Colorado every August. And as a result of meeting us on Zoom, their family decided to come to camp. They have for the last 3 or 4 years now. We did some training in Minneapolis, and we stayed at their house while we were in Minneapolis. They've stayed at our house. The CAFO I met you at, they flew down here and drove with us. We were in Kansas City with them and do like a hybrid conference / couples weekend. We're going to a marriage retreat with them in May. And all of it was because we were willing to say, we're bored and we feel alone. Does anybody want to talk to us? So I suppose the real point at the end of that story is you need to be vulnerable. And part of it is, I think early on, Kayla said, well, we don't want to talk about the things we're struggling with. Well, that's a mistake, because what I've learned is that everybody is struggling with the same or worse at their house. We several years ago, when our 22-year-old son was 18, and he decided that he could not live in our draconian fascist kingdom that we had created, and peeled out with his middle fingers out the window, and then spent 18 months trying to tell everybody what monsters we were. That was devastating. That was hard for me. It was devastating for Kayla.
Yeah.
Because of the way we're biologically wired. She felt betrayed by her son, and I felt angry at our son because he had hurt that which is the most precious to me in this world, my bride.
Mm-hmm.
And so the good of that, though, is she went and found a new therapist, somebody who really did not take it easy on her. And the amount of growth in my wife since that incident is noticeable. But I will tell you that he called us almost 2 years later and said, hey, would it be okay if I come home for my birthday? And we said, dude, door's always open. I don't care what you've done, what you said, that door's always open. And he came home, and it was awkward for a while. Turns out he got himself into trouble with the law, and he just needed some place to kind of reset.
Right.
But we've worked on rebuilding that relationship, and it's good now. But in the midst of all of that, we were like, oh my gosh, we cannot tell people about this struggle, because how will that reflect on us? People come to us for answers. They can't know we were going through this. And then Kayla said to me, yeah, I don't think that matters. And she started just, when people were asking, how's it going, she'd answer it honestly. And then all of a sudden, all these people were like, oh my gosh, we've had the exact same experience. Sometime near the end of their senior year of high school, particularly sons, not exclusively, but more often than not, the boys would just want this real break from the family. And he rocked a lot of people's world in that 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
But what we learned is there's this whole community of people who are struggling with their teens and young adults. Well, we believe that any experience that we go through, particularly negatively, is just a learning opportunity so that we can benefit somebody else. It's I think, how we stay sane during the hard time. Because it's not just how do we navigate this, but how can we share how we navigated this, because of my firm belief that one day the boat will be in calmer waters. And so now we speak on how to help your teens and young adults when they make decisions you disagree with.
Right.
Well, we couldn't have done that if we didn't have a young adult who made decisions we didn't agree with. And so part of that's therapeutic. And then when we do things about teens, there's all these clusters of people around the room, And we always encourage them to connect, because we don't need to be in the same room, as evidenced by this conversation, for us to have a meaningful conversation.
Right.
The digital world makes a lot of those things that were really annoying very, very doable now.
How do you how do you be vulnerable about what's going on and still protect your kids' stories? Because I agree with you. I agree that you have to be vulnerable.
Yeah, so we never give all the specifics if talking about it, and we never identify who the person was. And so we'll say, we had an experience with one of our kids, is typically how we'll phrase that. Also, the habit we got into early, because somebody told us, if you wouldn't say it with your child in the room, don't say it if your kid's not in the room.
Yes. Amen.
And so one of the things that we got in the habit early on was to say, hey, there's a story about you that we think allows us to make this point. Do we have your permission to tell that story? And so, that's counter to the way I was raised. I was raised in a command and demand household. So now all of a sudden I'm concerned about the thoughts, feelings of a 6-year-old. Well, absolutely, because it's her story. And I think we need to recognize that it's her story. And I think we need to recognize that you have a really precious job, and that's, you're the guardian of somebody else's story until they can be the guardian of their own. Because for some of our kids, this, there are details about their story that they don't even know.
Right.
And so we believe don't say it if they're not in the room. We believe that you can't tell other people, because I'd hate for them to hear a ugly detail about their history because my mother-in-law and one of her friends were talking about it.
Right.
So, and as such, we just decided and were committed to not doing that. So we might even make it more generic in saying, just do it in narrative form and use it as a story of an example, and in no way connect it to our family at all.
Yes.
We might even say, well, we worked with this family one time, and here are some things that they struggled with.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing, though, Kim, if you're committed to getting your child's permission when your 6-year-old says to you, Daddy, I don't like the fact that you tell people I was born at 23 weeks, then I have to say, all right, baby, I won't do that anymore.
Right.
Because there was a time in the middle until she got into high school that she really did not want us to share that detail. She's okay with it now, but for 10 years in the middle over there, we didn't tell stories on that one, because I don't only get to honor her feelings on the matter when she agrees with me.
Right.
It's when somebody disagrees with you, can you keep your word? That's the real test.
Right. Well, I just think thank you for being more specific about that, because I see parents so often when we talk about being vulnerable, then they're not sharing how they're feeling and what they're struggling with. It then focuses on their kid's story, which I totally agree with you. We need to protect those stories. And so thank you for that.
Well,
so Ryan,
yes.
Oh, go ahead. Do you want to say something else?
No, I was just going to say that sometimes, when there are people who have microphones and stages and they do play kind of fast and loose with their kids' stories, because we've been in some of those audiences over the years.
Yeah.
And it's almost painful to listen to, because if you feel uncomfortable in your seat and you think, oh my gosh, what would her daughter be thinking now if she heard her mom talk about that in front of a room full of people?
Mm-hmm.
And so I suppose seeing that up front allowed us to go, yeah, we do not want to be those people, because life's all about you choose. What you have to do is you have to be able, and this is why the self-awareness and doing the work to understand yourself and doing the work to clear whatever hang-ups and hurts you have, is because if you don't, you will react to everything from your limbic system, where you should rather work to be at a place where you can respond to things from your cortical brain.
Yes.
And that's the goal, right? I do not want to react, I want to respond. And responding is considered, it is logical, it allows my emotions to have an opinion but not have the final say. And that is really the journey that we've tried to be on, so that we can move from reacting to responding.
Yes. Ryan, it has been so great talking to you. And we wrap up every episode with some just rapid fire questions. I'll just ask you some questions like, what's a fun fact about you?
What's fun facts about me? I used to shave my legs.
Oh, I need more information on that.
Oh, when I was in high school, the career trajectory was professional cyclist. I wanted to wear the yellow jersey in the Tour de France. And by the time I was in the 10th grade, we already had like a sponsorship deal with Cannondale. They gave us bikes and stuff. And so we were really competitive. And then I moved here when I graduated from high school, and life took a different turn. But in order, as you know, racing cyclists shave their legs.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being vulnerable with us about that. Um, what is you guys have so many family traditions. What is your favorite family tradition?
I'm assuming you mean like our nuclear family at the house.
Yes, yes.
My favorite family tradition is the last weekend of every month we check out. And so what that means is my mom and dad live about 15 minutes from our house, and Kayla's parents live about 45 minutes from our house. And when I grew up, every Sunday we had big, traditional English Sunday lunch with my dad's parents.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we became parents, I thought, I enjoyed seeing my grandparents every week. Life's busy. And so we go and we have lunch with my folks on Sunday after church. And then in the mid-afternoon, we head out to her parents' house and have dinner with them. But on the last weekend of the month, we don't do that. And we kind of just, we don't have any commitments. And we do, the kids call it family fun weekend. And so we'll go play mini golf, go to Top Golf, race go-karts, stay at home, watch a movie that the kids wanted to see. The kids love playing games, so we'll just play, cards until 1:30 in the morning. And so that's my favorite tradition.
I love that tradition. That is a great one. Okay, what's your dream vacation?
My dream vacation, to go to Fiji with Kayla and be in those little bungalows that are on stilts in the ocean. That's it. Just to lay on. I grew up 15 minutes from the beach, and so anytime, like we love going to Florida, especially on the West Coast where they got that soft white sand and clear water.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, and you probably noticed how quickly I said that because Kayla and I have actually discussed this. Just in those little bungalows out in the ocean in Fiji sounds like heaven on earth.
My hope is that that's just not a dream, Ryan, that becomes reality.
Well, Fiji Airways just started 3 months ago, direct flight from DFW to Fiji. So it's not even hard to get there anymore.
There you go. You need to do it. Okay. I want you to finish this thought. Every child
deserves somebody who understands them.
Yes, I agree. And you know what, Ryan? You and Kayla are helping people be that person for kids. So thank you for the work you do.
Thank you for saying that.
Oh, that's true. I wouldn't say it. How can people get in touch with you?
I mean, you just go to onebighappyhome.com. On the homepage, there's just, you scroll down past the picture of Kayla and I, and then there's links to, if resources for agencies, the podcast, coaching, churches, all of that stuff. So the website is probably the fastest way to do that. Also, we're, at One Big Happy Home on all the socials, so you can get there. You're mostly in the mind of Kayla North when you're on Instagram, so she'll post pictures of the kids. It's a little bit more personal, the Instagram stuff. But yeah, just at One Big Happy Home on all of the major socials, and then onebighappyhome.com.
And for adoptive and foster parents that would like Wherever You Go Devotional, we can get that from Amazon.
You can get Wherever You Go from Amazon. That is correct.
Or is there a better place to get it?
No. Amazon's the easiest way to get that if you're ordering one. But if you want bulk, you can just go to our website and click on Contact Us.
Okay, cool.
We were going to Kentucky on the weekend, and the church is going to have 150 families at a dinner, and so they ordered 150 copies of the book for the participants.
Nice. I appreciate that church and the way they're investing.
Me too. That was nice to see that check.
Yes, I bet it was. Ryan, thank you so much. I can't wait to see you. I guess it's probably the fall, but thank you for spending the afternoon, spending an hour here with us.
Thank you for inviting me. You know that I texted you a few months ago, and I just said I wish we got to talk more, because I do love talking to you. You are kind, and you don't let people off the hook easy, which I think is a great combination in a human being.
But you You and Kayla have been, I remember one time I was having some anxiety about something and I was a little, I don't know how to describe it. I was not myself. And I called you, and you and Kayla were walking, and you each put an earbud in. And we had the three of us had a wonderful conversation. So thank you for being a friend to me and a safe person for me. And you guys, look up One Big Happy Home. They have great resources. Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining me today on Every Child Belongs. If you found today's episode helpful, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to share this with a friend who might need to hear it. Together, we can create a world where every child belongs.